Welcome back to Out of the Blue, the podcast, where the stories behind the people are often just as powerful as the work they've shared with the world. Today's guest is one of those artists you may have heard thousands of times, even if you don't always know his name. Tim Pierce is a highly acclaimed Los Angeles-based session guitarist whose playing has helped shape the sound of modern music for more than 4 decades. From the radio to the movies, from number one hits to unforgettable album tracks, Tim's guitar has been part of the soundtrack of our lives. Born in 1958 and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Tim was inspired by the golden age of 1960s top 40 radio and the fire of players like Jimi Hendrix. He moved to Los Angeles at just 20 years old and quickly found himself in the middle of the music world, playing on Bon Jovi's breakout hit Runaway, and later touring the world with Rick Springfield. But Tim's true legend was built in the studio. He became one of LA's most in-demand first call session guitarists, earning recognition from Guitar World as one of the top 10 session guitarists. His playing can be heard on iconic recordings by Michael Jackson, Bon Jovi, Phil Collins, Crowded House, the Goo Goo Dolls, and so many more. Whether it's the rhythm guitar on Michael Jackson's Black or White, the second guitar on Don't Dream It's Over, the mandolin and slide guitar on Iris, or the Academy Award winning You'll Be in My Heart, Tim Pierce has left fingerprints on songs that millions of people carry in their hearts. And today, through his wildly successful Tim Pierce Guitar YouTube channel, he continues to inspire, teach, and encourage musicians around the world by sharing the wisdom, tone, technique, and heart of a lifetime in music. So today, along with my co-host, my son Vernon West III, the force behind our logo and theme song, I am truly honored to welcome a guitarist, educator, storyteller, and genuine session legend, Tim Pierce. Welcome to Out of the Blue, the podcast.
Well, thank you, Vernon. They said that you were the best at introducing people in the world, and I think I'm going to take that and transcribe it and make it at the front page of my bio. Thank you so much for the great introduction. It's a privilege to
I
be
got to
here.
say, it wrote itself, Tim. I mean, when Steve told me he to give you a call, I was like, Tim Pierce, and I looked you up, and I was like, oh my God. I was
That's
like
so
so
great.
excited to talk to you. And I told my brother, who's been my guitar player from the years of SAS and on for 35 years, and he was like, Tim Pierce. Oh wow! So he was amazed that he can't wait to watch this podcast. But enough of that. Let's get right to it. I love the fact that you started as a kid in in Albuquerque, listening to the radio, and you got your ass to LA at the age of 20. That man, oh my God, I almost think that itself to me, that's how you take out of the blue by the horns, right?
Well,
I mean,
I always dreamed of moving to LA, moving to California, because when I was a little kid, I was really into car culture and music and hot rods. And all the hot rods were out in LA. And the Schwinn Bicycle Company was out in LA. And all of the shows that I liked that were on our black and white TV were from LA. Then we got color, but it was always a dream of mine, and I got to visit the West Coast on a vacation when I was about 8 years old, and that was just magical to me. And so I always wanted to come back. Now, my love of music comes from 60s top 40 radio. So I was listening to the AM radio as a kid, and it was just so diverse and so amazing. You'd have Otis Redding, and then you'd have Peter, Paul, and Mary, then you'd have the Beatles, then you'd have Jimi Hendrix, Grand Funk Railroad, Glenn Campbell, all this diversity. And it just made me walk on air, the radio. And then in the late 60s, all the guitar heroes, all the British guitar, icons like Clapton, Beck, uh, and then Hendrix, just lit me up. uh, and so I was at a point where I realized I couldn't be on the sports teams because I wasn't big enough. So at about age 12, I stopped being able to, land on any of the school sports teams because I just wasn't big enough or strong enough, because I loved basketball too. I loved sports. And then, so I just started to pour myself into the guitar. I got obsessed with guitar at age 12, And that's how it all started.
It's funny because I think maybe that might be similar to a lot of musicians. I loved sports. I mean, my brother and I used to play hockey all the time, and he credits me to having tripped him because he was better at sports than I was. I was mediocre, and but I loved it. I was into it. I thought I was great in my own mind. I thought it was great. And I remember I was a goalie, and he came and tried to get one by me, and he didn't. But I was so pissed at him, I chased him down the ice, and I hooked him under his skate, and I tripped him, and pulled his groin. He said, I never made the high school team, so I had to play guitar that year, and that's why he played guitar. But I
Great.
myself, that was my thing because I must have been like uh, 15 or 16 that I found music was it. I mean, I was also trying to be in sports, hanging with the jocks, but then I found music, and it was the same thing. It was the Who and Tommy, it was all that stuff. And back then, the radio was so more vibrant.
It's incredibly diverse, from the Beach Boys to Neil Diamond to, yeah, just everybody.
And Neil Diamond's he's a great, he's one of those. He's a great songwriter, Neil Diamond. He's written some quite a few gems.
Yeah, I did two records with him about 7 years ago. We did an artist record and then a Christmas record back to back, and for Don Was, and so I got to spend a lot of time with Neil.
Oh, really? How
Yeah,
interesting.
it
I'm
was
glad I
nice.
brought that up. How was that? How was Neil?
Oh, he's great. He's very ornery, and he sings just like he did when he was a kid. It's
Yeah,
exactly the same voice.
he's got a powerful voice. He really does.
Very, very blunt when he asks for things. I respect that. And we actually got to go work at his studio. He's had this fabulous studio on Beverly Boulevard that looks like a time capsule from the 70s. And we got to work at his place near the end. We did most of it at Henson, which is now called Chaplin. And John Mayer now owns half of it. But uh, then we went over to his studio and did a film shoot. And it was amazing to be in a time capsule from his early years.
And you toured with Rick Springfield in the early 80s, right?
Mhm.
Now, that must have been a ball. How's Rick
It was
Springfield?
Rick and I are still good friends, and he's doing great these days. But it was from 1983 to 1988. It was 5 years, and it was wonderful. We did 4 or 5 world tours, and I ended up doing 5 records with him, and it was a very wonderful group of people. And uh, he's still a friend to this day. That was his heyday, but he's never stopped. And in some ways, he's doing better than ever because he kept playing, so he kept his audience.
That's
And I think he's
awesome.
77, and he's still, with his shirt off and his energy, he's still. The aesthetic on stage was very like the Who. He was a pop star, but his stage on stage, we were more like the Who than a pop band. Very very strident, loud guitars and very rock.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing early stage shows of Rick Springfield back in those days. Maybe it was on MTV or something. I don't know where I saw it. But the live show looked very much raw rock and roll. It did
Yeah, it
not,
was.
yeah.
It's always it's the same as it is now with him. It's very rock and very, guitars with Marshalls, and
Yep.
it's a rock show. Yeah,
Yeah. And pounding drums and you
yeah,
know, the stuff that makes that stuff happen are those pops, when you're real tight and it just slams, it hits you right in the face, and then he's got as far as what my idea of the good best music is to have great vocals on top of that power because that's the Who. I remember seeing the Who when I was 14. I was completely blown away. I mean, the harmonies came in, and then Daltrey, and the whole thing, interest was growling away, and Moon the best drum I've ever seen live in my life. My son gets close to him,
great.
but Moon was like he was like a living heartbeat with no skin. Like he was just completely like it's so real and animated and just wow, all of the arms flailing, sticks flying off the cymbal into the audience. Obviously, tricks you learn from playing live. Like just flicking picks out and stuff. All that stuff. All is stagecraft. They had everything you could think of that way. That was one of my favorites. But you would bring Springfield. That had to be so exciting.
It was. It was great. It's a great time.
And then that was your last tour, I think, right? Then you went from there to,
Well, I decided not to tour anymore because even then I thought this is not where I want to spend my life. I really, I was enamored by all the studio musicians and I loved recording. I loved being in the studio. And, in the early 80s, I got to do Runaway with Bon Jovi. And then I got to do a John Waite record with Neil Giraldo that I'm still very proud of to this day. And then in the late 80s, I got to do Crowded House, Don't Dream It's Over, and a record with them. And so I was doing recording, and that's where my love was. I wanted to be a scientist in a laboratory rather than a performer on a stage. So in 1988, when Rick wound his thing down for, he took a break, I just planted my feet and I did publishing demos with songwriters, and I got better at the craft of coming up with guitar parts quickly, easily, and getting people ask for the moon, they ask for every idea they can possibly think of, and you try and give it to them, and it's a demanding job, but I got better at it in the late 80s, and by about 1990 I was able to start doing records every day in LA, and I continued that for, gosh, 30 years. And it was what I wanted to do. It was exhausting, but I really enjoyed being in the studio because you were creating new things every day. When you get on stage, you're basically recreating something that you perfected in rehearsals. Although if you're, the Grateful Dead or a band like Goose or Dave Matthews, you are improvising during those shows, so it's not a hard and fast rule. But in most cases, like with the Eagles or whatever, you're recreating what has already been done. The studio, you show up, you have no idea what you're going to do. You're being thrown a blank sheet of paper and asked to create on the spot, and so it's really demanding, but it's also very satisfying. And then that thing that you do ends up permanent on a record forever.
yeah,
So
that's
it's
awesome.
just a much better way to invest your time, and these things last forever. It's like Iris became, it has the second resurgence is even bigger than the first one, and being able to do something like that and have it be reborn many years later in a much greater way, those things don't happen if you're on the road. Everything you do on the road evaporates, and it's great, it's fine, but when you record something, it can be, it's permanent for the rest of your life. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to be in the laboratory. And the thing about it is, the first day I worked with Phil Collins, he asked me to go on the road with him, and I said no, because I was quite sure at that point that I wanted to be at the end of the phone anytime somebody called. And think I told you this before, but if you're in a hotel room in Minnesota or Wisconsin and you get the call to do the great session, somebody else gets that gig and they might work with that artist for the next 10 years. So if Bruce Springsteen calls and you're in Wisconsin and they need a guitar player, the other person gets that gig and they might end up working with Bruce for the rest of their lives. So these doors open, but they also open in a fashion that might lead to something really, really permanent. So I just never wanted to be caught in a hotel room somewhere when I got a really great call, because those calls would come very spontaneously sometimes. So, I just planted my feet and turned down the big road money and just stayed home and waited for people to call. And that was, there's really the best thing to do.
It really obviously worked really well for you. It really did. And I think that makes so much sense in so many levels. But I'm thinking about it from an out of the blue standpoint. It's like your intuition was so, I mean, I think part of being a musician is developing this very good intuition because
Right.
you have to empathize with people what they want. You have to give them something, but you have to intuit it in a way, and
Absolutely.
you know, so as you tune that up, like you get more and more able to be in the right, you find the way to be in the right place at the right time. It's really what it comes
Hmm.
down to. And like you were saying, you didn't want to be in a position where you wouldn't be open to getting that opportunity to say with Bruce Springsteen or whatever, and all the other, well, all the many projects you've been involved with were because you were there and you learned to play the universe the way the out of the blue keyboard works. You know, it's like a sort of a synthesizer, the other blue keyboard that you just know that you just follow the melody that you're hearing in your intuition and you go with it and you know that's going to lead to the next thing you need to do. And I think that's what you're such an inspirational example of that. Now, and here you are, what you're doing with your masterclass and you're teaching, you're sharing, I think probably more than just your music, is sharing your wisdom, sharing
Absolutely. Yeah.
that intuition that came out of those experiences.
The great thing about having an education business is that it's been a wonderful way to segue out of my career as a studio musician. My career as a studio musician lasted 40 years. And when COVID hit, we had just made a brand new, my education business was up and running, but we had just made a brand new website. We'd spent 4 months building a new website, and the timing was really great because the minute we finished, there was a lockdown, and it turned out everybody wanted to stay home and learn guitar. So the business, actually, the online, the masterclass, the subscription for guitar players, um, doubled during COVID, and then we've been able to grow it a lot ever since then. So it's been a wonderful way to enter a new chapter, because the studio business is not as robust as it once was. And then as a veteran musician, you're going to age out anyway at a certain point. They're going to want a younger person who'll work harder for, frankly, for less money than you were accustomed to getting. So that's part of it too. But more than that, they want, they want to see, they don't necessarily want to see somebody their dad's age in the chair. Now, there are many, many young people who treated me like a legend every time I showed up. So that's not a hard and fast rule, but it's more, it's there's a changing of the guard that's inevitable and natural. And it was just great for me and very lucky to actually have something to pour my energies into. And frankly, at this point, I like it better. I get to play my own music. I get to tell my own stories. I get to teach behind a paywall for people who pay once a year for the subscription, and it's just a wonderful way to keep music going in my life. And I interview a lot of great guitar players. A lot of my YouTube videos are interviews with great guitar players, or I show some gear that I like, or or teach, or whatever. You can do anything you want, and it's demanding, but it's great for me at this point. I'm super happy to be doing this.
I hope we have a good amount of musicians to tune into Out of the Blue. So I'm hoping, we can send some your way.
Awesome,
This is
awesome.
what it does play exactly into what I'm saying, that you have been able to navigate your life into the point, like, you're aware of the fact that, there's always going to be a new gunslinger in town,
Yeah,
and it doesn't mean he's going to be faster, quicker draw, or even a better shot. It's just that they're new. It's a new flavor. I loved what you said when we talked in our rehearsal meeting. We were talking about how the oligarchs have done something to the music business that has sucked something out of it. I'd like to talk about that a little bit. What
yeah,
can,
of course, of
you
course.
know,
So when everything began with the MP3 and Napster, that was one level of taking away the money in music and devaluing creative stuff. So there was that. But now it's at a different level, because if you take something like Spotify, which as a user, I signed up for Spotify the first week it came to America. It was out in Europe and the UK, I was about 14 years ago, I think. And the first week it came here, I signed up for it. And now I have Apple Music, and both Spotify and Apple Music pay creators, but they pay creators a fraction of what they used to get. And it's the kind of pay structure that doesn't make it's not a living wage for
no
most
way,
creators,
right?
most musicians. So they've gotten away with saying that they take care of musicians and creators and artists, but they don't really, because it's not a living wage. And the person that owns Spotify is, that's where all the wealth goes, to that person. And then the record companies made backdoor deals with the streamers, and they're part owners, and so they get really, really big. They have a big stake, and they get paid really well from the streaming companies. So everybody at the top makes money from the people who actually did the work and are doing the work, and that's unfair. And it's a trend. The oligarchs that make the money from the people that create the actual work. And there's more and more of that in our society, and I don't know how to unwind that. um
I definitely spent more than too much time thinking about what is the solution, not just for musicians, for artists, but for the humanity. I mean, part of Out of the Blues, uh, the reason I formed it uh, was because I figured if there's an answer, it's going to come from out of the blue. I mean, like everything that's worth anything in my life has always been that it came out of the blue. That opening up a Bonnie Raitt, getting you on the show, everything comes
Well,
out of the
yeah,
blue.
I'll tell you what I recommend. If you're willing to work hard enough, like an artist can create their own audience and take 100% of their income. And if they get 1,000 people, if an artist gets 1,000 people to pay them $100 a year, that's $100,000 a year. So I've always kind of, the subscription model has worked great for me. And I think as an artist, if you could, and Patreon does that for people, it's a way. Patreon's the same thing,
Yeah, we're on
essentially.
Patreon. We're on Patreon.
Yeah, yeah. So if you build it enough, you can actually make a living from the people that actually care about you the most.
That's
Now, the
right.
great thing about that is that you know about record deals, they're very unfair. I always said that if you took a record deal to one of my attorney friends in Albuquerque, they would either say, this is not legal, or they would say, you're a fool for signing this, because it's just so unfair. You get 10% of your income after you recoup your advances. So it's a very unfair deal to get very little in return by partnering with a company that might very likely just put you on a shelf, stop promoting you, and just own you outright and freeze you as promote you. And even if they do promote you, there's a limit to how much they're going to promote you. And then if somebody else comes along, they're going to promote them instead. And yet you're still signed to this company and you're still getting a fraction of the money you should. So what's great about the system actually that's in place now, it incentivizes artists to actually become entrepreneurs and make their own businesses and take 100%. And that is the best thing in the world. I mean, it just incentivizes you to do it yourself. So that's the great thing about it, but it's a heck of a lot of work.
See that, you know what? That's exactly what I'm thinking myself. And so I'm so happy to hear you. I'm very much in alignment with that thinking. And I feel like the only way forward is to become your own company. To be like you said, the subscription-based model. Like for example, out of the blue, we went through Patreon. We've had some subscribers there. We just turned our own website into our own Patreon. So we
Great.
offer a paywall and for more content for more. And now we've expanded to out of the blue music and more. So we're going to do the same thing with our music. And all my son makes music, my daughter makes music, I make music. We're going to be selling our music to people, and we're going to own our own everything. There's no one. Don't put it on Spotify. Don't put it out there. Just you want it, you come here. This is it.
That's excellent.
And we're building our platform. We got maybe 20,000 now so far. So and that was in 1 year. I mean, did it pretty quickly. There's a lot of people out there that I think, I went. It's funny because I was at a meeting with Fidelity, talking about future monies and stuff like that, trying to think of what we're going to do in the future with whatever money we have saved. And he's saying to me, he found out about Out of the Blue, and he goes, he's guy's like 31 or 30, he's 30 something, right? And he goes, you're doing a podcast because me and my friends, we don't want that's all we want. We want to get everything from podcasts that aren't owned by big big business, big corporate, oligarchs. And so I didn't little did I know podcasts are like punk rock.
Yeah, there's a big black backlash against AI, anything that's not genuine and real, and so that's a positive force. Yeah, I'm hearing that too. It's really wonderful. People are really rejecting the idea of corporations and AI and anything that's not homegrown.
Yeah, grassroots. That's where it
Hmm.
is, man. That's where it is at. Grassroots. I
Yeah,
feel like that's going to be ultimately the way we're going to turn it around.
yeah, that's real. Yeah.
So I looking at that wall of gear on your right there. Look at that wall of uh, what is on that wall right
Most of
there?
them are mic pre's. Most of them are Neve style mic pre's from BAE, and then there's a compressor and a D to A converter, some API mic pre's, distressor. some esoteric stuff, but yeah, that's my microphones. I have big cabinets down in my garage in a vault, and so I get my guitar sounds. I get real guitar sounds from amps that are stadium loud in my garage, in a soundproof vault. Yeah.
And I remember when I went to the studio and the guy was pulled out his Pro Tools, and that because I remembered that when you wanted to change tracks, you might have to go in and splice a track right out of that tape. But with Pro Tools now, you could copy, paste, cut, delete, everything, and then they throw it back on a 2.5 or whatever, and it was like, is that real? But that took over. That took over.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
But you must use it, right? You must use it now. But you
I
get
do have it right in front of me. Yeah, I love it. I've been using it for
and
a
you can
long
get
time.
great sounds if you get. It's all about your ears too. If you know what you're listening for, the warmth of the sound you want.
Oh yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, it does. It's the only problem with music. It's not digital recording. It's the end user gets a very downgraded version. Now, what you hear on streaming services is pretty good at this point, but the high fidelity audio that we record in our studios is um, way, way, way above what the end user gets. So it actually sounds the way we record in Pro Tools at 48 or 96 or 192 is sounds better than vinyl, and it can sound better than tape. Tape just offered a warmth that was desirable, but you can actually imitate that with the way that you EQ stuff or various plugins. But Pro Tools sounds great when you're in the realm and in the environment and in the domain where you're actually recording with it. What happens is when the end user plays it on their phone or their laptop or whatever, that version is downgraded, and it's always been that way. And high fidelity audio never really materialized for music like it should have. Maybe it will someday. It's better than it used to be, but that's the problem. Pro Tools sounds great. Digital recording sounds great at the source, but it's the end user version that is downgraded.
Yeah, because I mean, when you want to in the studio, we're hearing a wave file or something of that,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's so much bigger, right?
yeah.
And then once it
Hmm.
goes down to even what the next down is a MP4, I guess, right? Is that
Yeah,
we end up shrinking it down, and it's compressed. It's what it's compressed.
yeah.
The let's get back to I guess we want to get towards the end of your life as a your culmination. You became this teacher now, and you covered all that. And I want to just touch one more thing about Phil Collins. How you worked with him and you did Tarzan. What was it like working with Phil Collins, first of all?
Well, it was a dream come true, first of all. When I got the call that the session was going to happen, I was in a state of disbelief. And when I showed up at the session at Conway, which is a fabulous studio down in LA, um, in East Hollywood, I walked into the room and my gear was already there because we used cartage, everything was already set up. Walked into the room and Phil was tuning his drums. Okay, he was already there. He's a super disciplined guy. And the Phil in the air tonight. Dun, dun, dun,
Yeah,
dun,
yeah,
dun,
yeah,
dun,
right.
dun, 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 dun. The crazy thing is that's what he does when he's tuning his drums. He goes dun, 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 dun. So he basically I walk in and he's basically doing a version of that fill to tune his drums. And I'm just in a state of disbelief. And it sounds exactly like the record because of the way he's hitting it, the way they sound. It sounds exactly like In the Air Tonight. And I'm going, I can't believe this. He is tuning because most people hire techs to tune their drums. He's tuning his own drums and he's playing that fill. It's just all around the toms. And we had a song that we worked up and we tracked it live. It was me and Mark Goldenberg on guitars, Jamie Mahovrak on keyboards, John Pierce on bass. There were a couple of programmers there too, because there were some loops going on and stuff. And it was an amazing day. And we got this great song. It was basically what you hear on You'll Be in My Heart was all cut live except for the orchestra, which was added later. So everything you hear there was cut live except for the orchestra. So it was just great to do that spontaneously. And then we did more songs for Tarzan. And when he won the Academy Award, he was an actor, child actor. It just meant the world to him. So I ended up working with him for a few years after that. I went to Switzerland, and there used to be this company called Rocket Cargo. I'm sure they're still around, but budgets were big. Well, when you get to Phil's level, the record company no longer pays your bills. You pay them yourself. That way you can control everything. So there's an unlimited budget. That's how Neil Diamond was too. They make these records with their own funds, and once again it's about ownership. The record company is more of like a licensing partner at that point. So they just spend their own funds to make the record happen. So there's really no limit on the budget. They know it takes a lot of money, and they just spend it. Phil, they put everything. I brought every amp and rack and almost all my guitars. They put them on a pallet and load that on a 747 and flew it to Switzerland where Phil was living. So I have no idea what that would have even cost, because it's an expensive thing. But
It's crazy.
he rented a chalet down by the lake, Lake Geneva, and they set up a famous mobile truck, like the Rolling Stones mobile truck or whatever. And that was that. And then he set up his drums in the great room of the chalet, and we recorded the record, and we would all eat together, all have lunch together, and it was wonderful. He lived nearby, and he would drive down to the studio, and we stayed in a hotel on the lake, and we were there for about 6 weeks, and it turned out to be a great record. And then we came back, and I did another movie with him. Maybe it was Tarzan 2 or Brother Bear. That's what it was, Brother Bear. And it was just a wonderful, run with Phil. It was just amazing. A
Yeah,
great guy,
wow.
very disciplined, very, very easygoing, very, you know,
That sounds heavenly. It really does.
nice. Yeah.
Heavenly. It does. That's the word that comes to my
Yeah, it's
mind.
wonderful.
Heavenly. And
Yeah.
again, there you are, playing the out of the blue keyboard. You knew to stay put, so you'd be there for that phone call.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there you are, you were on that plane to Switzerland, and you're spending time in heaven doing exactly what you love to do.
Yeah.
It's what it really comes down to, focusing on what it is you love. Your power is in your passion.
The thing about being at the right place at the right time, you have to be prepared. So you have to be willing to wait for it. So if you prepare yourself for any eventuality in whatever you're doing, what you love, just prepare yourself by practicing as much as you can. Whether it's golf or guitar or medicine or whatever, and then when the opportunity comes, you'll be ready to take it. But the other thing that is is hard for musicians, because musicians like to have a dynamic life. It's always changing. You're in Prague, and then you're in New York, and then you're home, and then you're at a winery. You're doing gigs everywhere. And you're meeting new people all the time, and it's just changing all the time and dynamic. But really, the thing that you have to have is consistency. And that means, and that was something that I could have learned earlier, but I was obsessed with what I did, but I wasn't the most consistent musician. And when I did get sober, then my consistency was bulletproof. And consistency is boring. So it's like when you go see a doctor, that doctor has done life-saving surgeries on a weekly basis for weeks, and is doing it that week and for weeks ahead, weeks behind him, weeks ahead. It's the same day. He's living the same day every day, saving lives, but he needs to be 100% consistent. And that means getting enough sleep, taking care of yourself. And I think that's a hard thing for musicians sometimes, because they really sometimes like to go off the rails and experiment with stuff. And uh, I think that really is the key, to recognize that there's great value in having boundaries and being consistent and taking care of yourself, and just knowing that you can show up. I mean, any actor we love, they don't get hired unless they have a reputation for being able to deliver 100% of the time. So that's really what it is. If you can structure your life so that you are not getting in trouble in any of those areas that we used to, by whatever drugs, alcohol, like that. And it could be relationships. It could be your temperament. Your temperament could be too volatile to allow you to actually be, easy to get along with. There's all kinds of ways that you could derail your consistency. And being consistent, being reliable, being bulletproof, being prepared, and then what you really need to do is be willing to wait for it, because the opportunity that changes your life could come tomorrow or next week or next month or next year or 5 years from now. So you really need to be able to be at peace with your life and what you're doing and accept what you've got and be willing to wait for it. Wait for the opportunities to come. And it certainly is easier if you live in Nashville or New York or LA or Paris or London or a big city where, there are more opportunities. But these days it could come from anywhere. So, it's different if you're if you're building, a profile live. Like Joe Bonamassa is, amazing at Joe Bonamassa. He's a friend of mine, and he does everything himself. He has his own trucks, his own buses. They don't use agents. They book their own venues. They do all their own promotion, advertising. They literally book the venue. They do everything to get the gear there. They do all the advertising. They hire everybody. It's 100% in-house, and that's another great way to prosper. And there's just different ways to do it depending on what side of the music business you're in.
Right. Vernon, you must have a question, a young musician, forging your way through the
Yeah,
world.
I mean, yeah, you're preaching to the choir a little bit. I mean, to me at least, because I'm in the process of grinding it out, trying to nail that consistency. I am physically exhausted, but I'm happy. And you have to first come, like you're saying. I mean, I'm not saying anything new. It just really resonates. You have to find peace with just the process of digging in, playing music because you love it, because you don't get paid for it really. You might get a little bit to eat, you might get a place to stay, maybe. But you got to really find peace with just loving the process. And I've come to accept that it's impossible to know if you will ever break into a higher echelon or when you will. Um, I guess it depends on kind of what you're doing. I really appreciate the fact that you've found um, something that you love to do, like a specific. I don't know if you'd call it a niche, but like being the scientist in the lab is a very like it's a specific sort of gig, and you get really good at that one gig, then it's harder for other people to compete. I guess you shouldn't really look at it that way, but you're gonna be one of the best in the thing that you focus on.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm really inspired by that because I'm a drummer, I'm a songwriter, I'm a singer, I'm a guitarist, and I'm getting pulled in 900 different directions. And I'm wondering like what is that one area that I love the most, and should I invest everything I have in that? So, sorry, I've been very quiet this podcast because, sometimes I like to be in in church, and I feel like you've been the pastor today. Um,
Well,
but all that
you're
to
not
say,
wrong. Yeah. Keep going.
yeah. Well, all that to say, um, the waiting is the hardest part, to quote a song.
Tom Petty.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's infuriating, but I don't think I would rather be doing anything else. What does any of that make you say, make you
Well,
think?
first of all, the young musician plays every instrument. So I'm glad you play every instrument. At a certain point, you might want to focus on one thing if it seems like the opportunities will be there. But when you focus on that one thing, all the other things you do will become just as important because you'll be in the room doing that one thing, and then you'll be able to offer all the other things. You need to be able to do everything. You need to be able to compose for any kind of film and television. You need to be able to compose for any kind of top line singers. You need to be able to play an instrument that you can take on the road and back up Olivia Rodrigo or whoever is needing musicians. You need to be one of those guys. You need to sing. You need to do everything you possibly can. But you also, at a certain point, might want to consider adding teaching to your thing. I mean, I know so many musicians who have a digital product that's 2 or 3 hours long. That's just a link that people click on. Somebody will pay you $50 to get your bass lessons or whatever. So that's an opportunity you can add to your list. But I remember at a certain point, I wrote songs from the age of 14 until I was about 30 something. And when I stopped writing songs, this is going to sound counterintuitive. It was a paradox. When I stopped, and I had some success, I had some covers, I made some money. When I stopped writing songs, my career got a lot better because I just focused only on being a guitar player. Because the songwriters I was going in the studio with were, Peter Cetera and Tina Turner and Michael Jackson. And I was not as good as these people I was working with. I was good enough to play guitar with them, but my songwriting was not, I was not a brilliant songwriter like all the people. So I let the songwriters write their songs and I became a guitar player in service of that. And my career got a lot better because I wasn't spending all those hours trying to create those songs and fighting that fight. So I have benefited from doing one thing at a time and focusing on one thing primarily. And you're right, waiting is the hardest part, but you have plenty of time. And it's a long life, and just keep going. And you can always do something else later, but you can't do this later. You got to do this now. You got to be an artist now. And I think you probably know that, and I think you're committed to that, and that's all it takes.
What I was recalling you saying about sobriety, I have to say that in my personal experience, that by putting my sobriety first, making myself stay in what I learned from sobriety is to be aware of everything in my life and be a good person in as many areas as I could and live that kind of life because sobriety taught me that. And coming
Yeah,
through, you know, and that informs that musician I also play a lot of instruments but I am leaning towards songwriting now in my vintage years because I find that that's more I can't do it any I do that better than anything. So I
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm finding that might give me an opportunity to give other musicians opportunity because it has to do with sobriety, it has to do with being able to live life and enjoy moments like that, And to me, that's what I always what I say now, you've um, reinforced the idea that that passion that you have for what you do, focusing on your guitar playing and as you're being that Imagineer kind of person for the guitar has informed your life and brought you out of into the world. Look what you've done. I mean, what a great legacy because if you did that, and it had a lot. I'm sure your sobriety played a big role in that.
Oh yeah. I was good before I got sober, but I wasn't always at my best. Okay. And you don't get hired to be anything but at your best if you're in the entertainment industry or if you're a doctor or an airline pilot. But I got away with it, and it's okay. Usually meant lack of sleep. I never, it's just I usually showed up not having slept the best I could have. And that was really the only issue, or being run down from not being as healthy as I should have been. But I was not at my best, and I was not consistent, and emotionally, you're just not as resilient if you're partying on the weekends. You're not as resilient, and you're not as consistent. Um, or if one night you drink more than you should, and you wake up with a hangover, and you're fine, you can do it, but you're just not as good. So when I did get sober, I was good every day. I was better. I was at my best every
It-
morning, every
you
day,
know, and
7 days a week.
and ultimately that's because you're getting the dopamine, the high from your work, from the
All
things
that
you
true
love.
is true. Yeah, it's you have to replace that chemistry that you've created in yourself with a new chemistry, and that's the challenge.
Yeah,
And like I said, it's you got to trade exciting for boring. I guarantee the thing is, you learn about these actors who are superstars. They get up at 5 in the morning and they work 12 hours and they go to bed at 9 p.m., and they learn their lines. And these are the people who are the superstars. And I have a musician friend who's the top studio player here in LA. I'll keep his name because this is a personal thing, but he likes to go to bed at 9 p.m. He loves to get up early. That's discipline. I never really had that. I like to watch even now I like to watch Netflix till 11 p.m., 11:30, and then but it's really the ability to exchange exciting for boring. That really is what makes everything blossom. It's crazy. And then have an exciting trip to Europe or something, but
That is such an amazing paradox.
yeah.
Exchanging exciting for boring. And guess what? That's how you
Yeah.
become huge at what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's
delayed
yeah.
gratification is
Yeah.
important.
Darn it. Yeah, delayed gratification. Yeah, exactly. Discipline. And
And,
darn
then,
it, right?
and
Dang
those,
it.
yeah, right. You're getting up early, you're working hard, and you go to bed early, and you're just doing work,
Yeah.
work, work. And then later on, you're looking back and oh, you get to enjoy it later.
Yeah.
It's
No,
like,
it's the enjoyment comes in different ways. It's just, being a man among men, a person among people is really what, that's how you do special things. You don't have to be special to do special things. So it's better, I think, well, I know it's better just to be traditional in certain things.
awesome.
Be
Well,
normal, be regular.
be regular, right? Hey, there's a lot to be said about being regular. So, anyway, thank you so much, Tim. This has been an amazing podcast.
Thank you too, and let's do it again sometime. Let's
Well,
check in again.
you can count
Yeah.
on it. I'm going to be talking to you about that very shortly. So everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us here with this amazing conversation with Tim Pierce and also Vernon the Third hanging out and with us. And we are so grateful that you joined us, and we hope you'll be back on. Tim's coming back.
Part
And
two, absolutely.
part two is coming soon. So anyway,
Yeah,
thanks God, everybody. Hit that like, smash that everything, and subscribe, and don't forget we're going to post Tim's website too, and everything you can
great.
subscribe
Thank you.
to.
Appreciate
Thank you
that.
everybody for joining Out of the Blue. This is Vernon West and Vernon West III, and of course, the myth, the man, and the legend, Tim Pierce. Thank you, Tim, so much. Have a
Thanks.
great day,
Bye.
everybody. Out of the Blue, the podcast, hosted by me, Vernon West, co-hosted by Vernon West III, edited by Joe Gallo, music and logo by Vernon West III. Have an Out of the Blue story of your own you'd like to share? Reach us at info@outoftheblue-thepodcast.org. Subscribe to Out of the Blue on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and on our website, outoftheblue-thepodcast.org.